It's 20 degrees on this Tuesday afternoon. Ross Davies with you at the Tanaka Creek Watershed Stewardship Center. And today we're going to take a little walkabout to Cliff Falls and return. It's a field trip we offer quite a bit as we roll on into late spring into summer as well, although it's good any time of the year. Today we're going to start and end here. There's a few other ways that you can do it. The second most popular route in is from the ball fields at 252nd, and you can also access it off of 112th. And look at this, you got two snowshoe hares right there, and just a bunny hop away from the Stewardship Center. But the other entrance is off 112th Avenue, so we'll go show you the entrance, trailhead, and a few things along the way. Bye-bye bunnies. So you got a snowshoe hare right there, and they don't always turn white anymore. Sometimes they stay brown all winter long, just because of the climate change that's been happening. And there's your trail map. It's about 1.3 kilometers down to Cliff Falls, which is where we're intending to go. Okay, so here's your trailhead right here. Nice crosswalk, 256th Street. And you're looking for that sign right there. And we'll just head along here. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about while we're here, just down to my left, your left actually, is a roadside ditch, but not so fast. This is a fish-bearing stream that has cutthroat trout in it 12 months out of the year, and really decent water quality as well. So most people that drive by here wouldn't have the slightest idea. Just downstream at 256th Street, and look what we got here. This alder came down quite recently. And the question a lot of the time is, tree falls into the river, and now what? Well, within reason, we're going to leave that right where it is. It provides really good habitat. If it was going to threaten the bridge or something like that, that'd be another matter. But for the most part, that just stays where it is. Water level came up over this trail the 31st of January, eroded it a bit. And the highest we've seen was in March 2007, where it came about a meter higher than the trail bed itself and washed part of it out. So this creek can do some pretty darn amazing things. Just a little ways along this trail, we're passing through this grove of western red cedar. Of course, if a cedar like this one over here were to fall down, it'll last on the floor of the forest for probably about 100 years, because insects don't like the taste of the wood. The bark is nice and stringy, long been used for different types of purposes. We don't do that in the park, obviously. And evergreen trees have a couple things really going for them. They have needles for the most part, and not leaves. And needles aren't very favorable to get eaten by bugs. That's an advantage. These guys can also photosynthesize all winter long to some degree. That's an advantage. And the wood, I should say, on these trees is fairly flexible. So you talk about snow that can handle snow loads a lot better than deciduous trees like that broadleaf maple up there. They actually drop their leaves, stop photosynthesizing, and go dormant. If they didn't, the wood, being harder, is more brittle, and it would snap like a twig, as it were. So just a quick little note, this trail does have a few pretty challenging hills on it, so you don't have to be a triathlete, but if you have, really bad underlying health issues or things like that, this trail might be a little bit much, and it's not very stroller friendly either. So for folks like that, you're probably better off coming in from one of the other entrances, maybe 112th or 252nd. We're looking down on the gully here. We've gained quite a bit of elevation, and there's a big pile of logs and whatnot. That was up near 256, and it all moved down during that high water event on the 31st of January. As we take a look at some thimbleberry blossoms. And if you like that first hill, you're going to love this one. So a little bit different up here at the top of this hill. It's a little more open, a little warmer, a little brighter. And though this was probably originally a windstorm that came through here and created this opening, forest fire do the same thing. So you get stuff like salmonberry, different ferns coming along, vine maple, Eventually, things like cascara, red alder, cottonwood would get past them, and then along at the end come your big conifers. There you got a Sitka spruce there, and they've got a cool adaptation. They're almost at the edge of their range here, but you see huge monoculture stands of them out on the west coast close to the Pacific because they can handle salt air better than most. Kind of a cool adaptation here. Have a look at this. You've got a vine maple. I like to call these rainbow trees. These will never get as tall, as we got live coverage being provided by Chopper 7 above us. These won't get as tall as your big guys. So what their strategy is instead is to grow sideways and put a whole pile of little shoots off of this horizontal branch, and they're going to capture whatever light gets down here to the forest floor. So that's kind of what they do, and you'll see these vine maples overhanging the trail pretty much all along our walk this afternoon. So that's the way we'll be coming back, the infamous 96 steps. We're going to climb them later on. But first things first, we'll be heading this way, along this trail here. Right ahead of us is a huge western hemlock, really short needles. And more on that in a minute. So let's take a look at this. This happened around 2014, an April windstorm. And this big hemlock here just finally said, I'm not doing this anymore. And down it came right here. And there was a little slot cut so people could go through. Hemlocks are in tough. Climate change is really impacting them. They have a very shallow taproot. And they just have not been able to adapt to these extremes in weather that we've been getting more and more. With dry summer periods, it's sort of like the analogy. If you don't water your plant in the deck for 6 months, you could put 100 gallons on it, or 100 liters in the winter, but at that time it's too late. So hemlocks have been disappearing like crazy, and the cedars are starting to get kind of stressed too. So it's the changes are happening too fast for certain species to adapt to. Hello, fiddleheads. I always thought, that would be a good name for a rock and roll band. Let's check out the difference between western hemlock and our third conifer of the afternoon, the Douglas fir. Few key differences. This guy is not afraid of drought. He has a very deep taproot. Here it is, 19th of May. If it doesn't rain till August, this guy is not worried. The bark's really thick, and it's got an adaptation where if it heats up, like if there was a fire, the cracks on that bark will seal up, protect the inside of the tree. So it can survive fire, and we look at the back. This one did. That's been burned at some point, and a tree is doing just fine, thank you very much. There's the shallow roots of the hemlock going out sideways, which means they're not very wind firm either. See that metal bridge down there? That's the way we're coming back. We'll be on that trail in a little while. My, what happened here? Well, some of you might remember the massive windstorm of December 13th, 2006, which mowed down literally hundreds of trees in Stanley Park in Vancouver. Well, that baby came rolling in here later that evening. They took this cedar out of the ground and sent it down over the edge. Made such a big depression that the trail after it was built around it. And speaking of cedars, have a look at certainly the biggest nurse stump I know of in the park. And this was logged off around the start of the last century. You can still see some of the indentations in there for where they put the springboards in the side of the trunk and then sawed it down. So there's a whole bunch of trees growing out the top of that nurse stump, which has more food in it than a tree that's actually alive. So this has been in here for a long time, and it's not going anyplace anytime soon. This time of the year, it's just so great in here, isn't it, with all the native wildflowers? What we're looking at right now is trailing blackberry. Of course, we got to talk about Devil's Club, don't we? Look at all the spines on that thing. You don't want to mess with that. So there's not a lot of it in here, just a few little patches kind of here and there. Almost looks sort of prehistoric, doesn't it? Cool. So the joint's been jumping over here on this hemlock, all kinds of woodpecker holes. The rectangular shaped ones is probably the pileated, where the round ones could be something like a red-breasted sapsucker. Either way, interesting fact that bicycle and motorcycle helmets are designed after the design of a skull of a woodpecker, because all that pounding, It's a little harder on the old noggin, so they better have some reinforcement upstairs to kind of withstand all that stuff. And you've probably heard, usually it's northern flickers that do this, banging away on the metal chimney and making a huge racket. That's the guys trying to impress the girls. Humans do the same thing, but they use loud music and loud car exhaust. We come to the yellow posts, which means we are starting our final descent down into Cliff Falls. You can get down here from the Stewardship Center 20 minutes flat, but you know what, we're just sort of taking our time, checking things out along the way. Hello, little Hemlock. All right, let's watch our speed, because this one's steep. And that, folks, is what it's all about. So there's picnic tables here. You can bring a lunch. There is no running water. You've got to bring your own. And there's a washroom building here as well. But again, it's outhouse format. No running water, so bring your own washcloths, whatever you need. But we're just going to wander down and have a look at the falls themselves. As we get closer, just a reminder, this is a Sandstone Canyon, and as canyons go, this one's a baby. It's probably only 10,000 years old or so. The sandstone erodes really easily. And I want to show you something kind of cool down there. Those round holes look man-made. That's from water moving rocks in a circle like your washing machine, spinning it and carving these big round holes. This canyon's eroding upstream as we speak. Someday, it might be as far as the Stewardship Center. So we're seeing a relatively normal flow for later mid-May. This can really get going. You can see how high up the side of that wall that this water can get. On the far side is a cool bunch of what we call Maidenhair Fern, specially adapted to grow in the canyon. They need it wet and misty pretty much all the time, and they just love it down here. You can just barely make out a second waterfall over there. That's North Tanaka Creek, which joins main Tanaka right here, and then this goes down towards the Fraser. So some coho do make it over lower falls, which is downstream of us. None of them make it past these falls. So that's why every salmon at Bell Ring Hatchery at the Stewardship Center gets brought up there in the back of a pickup truck. Of course, the smolts going downriver, no problem. Over the falls they go. It doesn't even slow them down a bit. We're in the picnic area at Cliff Falls. There's the trail that goes up to 252nd, but we're going to be going up called the Pine Ridge Trail, which goes up past the meadow. There is a western hemlock that is dying from climate change. Pretty obvious. I'm going to pan over here to the right. There's one that won't be with us much longer either. It's got what we call a distress cone crop on it. So in a tree like this, since it's going to die, it's like it produces a gazillion cones trying to make little hemlocks before it sort of kicks the bucket. Some of these cedars looking a little stressed as well. So it's really, really fast climate change that we're in, of the likes we've never seen. Here's how it got its name. Mr. Cliff donated some of this land here. So there are lots of cliffs, but little known fact about Cliff Falls. And there you go. This is a good place to find wildlife trees, and we're just up the head of the meadow above the picnic area here. So the woodpeckers have been going at that standing dead hemlock, and if those holes get big enough, you could get a cavity nester like a black-capped chickadee that would actually go and live in there. So again, unless one of these trees is threatening the trail, that one is not. We're just going to leave it standing there and let it continue to provide some habitat here to the forest. There's yet another entrance I didn't tell you about. That trail to the left ends up out at 116th and 256. So you can come in that way as well. But we're going to swing right onto this Pine Ridge Trail. And we mentioned before about the spring flowers. And we got some bleeding heart over here. And a whole raft of coloration. Now we all know about flowers attracting pollinators, their colors, spreading the pollen around, doing that thing. And we're just starting to get some berries coming on. There's salmonberry right there. So birds and animals like that can spread the plants by spreading the berries, leaving droppings, getting a new plant going. So you got a whole bunch of different plants, other plants and animals that are kind of all working together, aren't they? Even the fungi and the trees have something cooking. Of course, fungi, they can't photosynthesize, so he's like, hey, buddy, can you send me down some sugars and stuff like that? And in return, I'll kind of help to protect you. So they were working together, too. I don't know, a palm tree, maybe? So we're descending down a steep grade towards the creek again, and you know what that means. You got to descend, you got to ascend, or ascend. The 96 steps are imminent, so we can look forward to that. But I stopped here because you got a western hemlock, and up there is a parasitic plant known as dwarf mistletoe. And the thing with this, it's those clumps that you can see, it's a parasite. So if the tree dies, mistletoe dies. So it doesn't kill the tree, but it can weaken it down so that something else like root rot comes along and finishes it off. So this tree is getting a little bit stressed at a time when climate change is doing it no favors. Okay, get a load of this. It came down fairly recently, took a big chunk of the bank. This was a western red cedar that fell across the trail, and it was cut apart and placed like so. So it's going to last a long, long time, and it may not even stay there. We could get high water here that would be up over my head that might actually move that downstream at some point. It's time to separate the men from the boys. Welcome to the 96 steps. Are we having fun yet? And from here, it's 10 minutes back the way we came to the Stewardship Center. Ross Davies with you on the Canyon Trail.